However, we all go through moments when we feel stuck, when we're questioning ourselves, doubting our worth, or wondering why things aren't turning out the way we envisioned. It's in those moments that we often forget something incredibly important God is working on you. It's easy to overlook this truth, especially when life feels overwhelming or things are moving slower than we'd like. But if we learn to embrace the process and have the courage to surrender to it, we can discover something truly powerful growth that transcends our understanding, strength that we didn't know we had, and a deeper connection to the person we were always meant to be. Life often has a way of testing us in ways we never expected. We have all been there at some point, feeling as if we are caught in the midst of a struggle that seems endless, painful, and unexplainable. We face seasons where we wonder why things aren't going the way we planned, why our efforts don't seem to be paying off, or why we're still fighting the same battles. During these times, it's easy to question ourselves and wonder if we're doing something wrong. We search for signs of progress, yet all we see is resistance. But here's a truth that is often overlooked. In a world where we celebrate success, achievement, and instant results, we often forget that real growth rarely looks glamorous. We are conditioned to think that growth is supposed to be visible, measurable, and immediate. We see others around us succeeding, excelling, and we think that's the mark of progress. But what if growth doesn't always look like that? What if growth is happening in the quiet, hidden moments where we feel the most vulnerable and uncertain? True transformation happens in places we can't always see those moments, when we're struggling, when things seem stagnant, or when we feel isolated and alone. It's in those times when nothing is visible to the outside world that God is doing the deep, hard work in us. These are the moments when our character is being shaped, our faith is being tested, and our resilience is being built. It's a process that's not often celebrated or acknowledged, but it's the kind of growth that lasts. Think of the way plants grow. Beneath the surface of the soil, a seed is struggling, pushing and fighting against the weight of the earth. It's not an easy journey. The seed can't see the light, it can't see the potential, it has to break through the surface and bloom. It's dark, it's confined, and it's hard. But that struggle is essential. Without it, there is no growth. Without that fight against the soil, the seed would never become the plant it was meant to be. It's the very struggle, the weight of the earth pushing down, the resistance it faces that enables the seed to grow stronger, to stretch, and to eventually break free. In the same way, our struggles are not signs of failure. They are part of our process. The moments when we feel like we're stuck or overwhelmed are often when we're actually growing the most. The resistance we face is not an obstacle to our growth. It is part of the transformation we need to go through to become who we are meant to be. Growth in life is rarely linear. It's not always about quick fixes or immediate results. It's about the gradual unfolding that takes place in the unseen places beneath the surface of our daily lives, where the deepest changes are taking root. Consider the experience of personal growth itself. We want change to be immediate. We want to make a decision today and see results tomorrow. But that's not how transformation works. It's like learning a new skill or breaking an old habit. We might put in the effort, we might even start seeing a little progress, but the real change takes place in those quiet moments when no one is watching. It happens when we practice patience, when we show up even when we don't feel like it, when we try again even after a setback. And in those moments of effort and struggle, it often feels like nothing is happening. We can't see the growth yet. We may feel discouraged because the changes aren't visible, but that doesn't mean nothing is happening beneath the surface. It's the same with us. When we feel like we're fighting an internal battle or stuck in a difficult season, it doesn't mean we're failing. It means God is working on us in ways that are not always visible to the outside world. We are being refined, shaped, and prepared for something greater that we may not yet understand. The challenge here is to trust the process. It's not always easy, and it's certainly not always comfortable. We want results, we want answers, and we want them now. But growth requires patience. It requires the ability to trust that we are being shaped, even when we can't see the changes. It means acknowledging that the struggle is a necessary part of the journey, not something to avoid or resent. Think about the times in your life when you faced something difficult and thought you weren't going to make it through. But you did. And you came out stronger, wiser, and more resilient than before. Those moments of struggle were not in vain. They were the very places where you grew, places you couldn't see at the time, but places that ultimately shaped you into who you are today. It's easy to want to skip the hard parts. We wish we could bypass the tough seasons, the long nights, the uncertainty, and the pain. But the truth is, we would miss out on the most important parts of our growth if we did. The pressure, the discomfort, the waiting, it's all part of the process of becoming who we were meant to be. The challenges and setbacks you face are refining you, just like a diamond being polished. It may not be easy, but it's necessary. And one day, when you look back, you'll see that those unseen places were not moments of defeat, but of deep, transformative growth. The key to embracing this truth is to stop seeing struggle as something to avoid or fear. Instead, see it as an invitation to grow in ways that you never could without it. We are often most vulnerable and most capable of real change when we are forced to confront our struggles head-on. Growth doesn't happen in the moments when everything is smooth and easy. It happens when we push through, when we keep going even though we feel like giving up. So the next time you find yourself in the midst of a struggle, don't despair. Don't judge yourself for not being further along in your journey. Understand that the growth you need might be happening in the very places you can't see yet. Your transformation might be unfolding in those moments when everything seems uncertain, when you're feeling tired, or when you wonder if you can go any further. But in those hidden, unseen spaces, you're becoming stronger, more capable, and more resilient than you realize. And that is where real growth happens. We live in a world that constantly tells us we need to be perfect in our appearance, perfect in our work, perfect in our relationships. From social media to advertising, we are bombarded with images of what success, happiness, and fulfillment are supposed to look like. We're given an ideal, a standard to live up to, and if we don't meet it, we feel like we're falling short. But here's a powerful truth that we often forget. Perfection, as society defines it, is an illusion. It is an unattainable standard that keeps us chasing something that isn't even real. The drive for perfection often leads to burnout, self-doubt, and a constant feeling of inadequacy. We compare ourselves to others, we criticize our own shortcomings, and we feel like we have to be everything to everyone in order to be worthy. This mindset can trap us in a cycle of striving for something that, by nature, cannot be attained. But what if the constant pressure to be perfect is actually keeping us from embracing our true selves? What if, instead of focusing on perfection, we allowed ourselves to embrace our flaws, our vulnerabilities, and our imperfections as part of the beautiful, unique person we already are? At some point, many of us have been taught that being imperfect means we are somehow less than or not enough. We think we need to change who we are, fix our flaws, or present a polished version of ourselves to the world in order to be accepted, loved, and successful. But the truth is that our imperfections are not signs of failure. They are a part of what makes us human, and they are what allow us to connect with others in meaningful, authentic ways. We spend so much of our time trying to get everything right, making sure we look the part, saying the right things, achieving the right milestones. We chase perfection because we believe that once we reach it, then we'll finally be good enough. But this constant striving can cause us to lose sight of the simple truth we are enough, exactly as we are right now. We don't need to become perfect to be worthy of love, success, or peace. Perfection is a moving target, a shifting goalpost that will never bring us the fulfillment we're searching for. There's power in embracing who we are in the present moment. It's a radical act to say, I am enough, just as I am, without needing to prove anything to anyone. This doesn't mean we stop growing or improving. It doesn't mean we don't aim to be better or do better. It simply means that we stop waiting for the perfect version of ourselves to show up before we start living fully. It means giving ourselves permission to be human, to make mistakes, to learn, and to grow. It means releasing the need for external validation and recognizing that our worth isn't tied to what we accomplish or how we appear to others. Letting go of perfection requires us to shift our mindset from one of constant striving to one of acceptance and self-compassion. It means acknowledging that mistakes and failures are a natural part of life, not something to be ashamed of. Each time we stumble or fall short, we have an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to build resilience. It's in these moments of imperfection that we often discover the deepest parts of ourselves. When we allow ourselves to fail, to be vulnerable, to ask for help, or to admit we don't know it all, we open up space for true connection with ourselves and others. In the quest for perfection, we forget the beauty of imperfection. We forget that it's our flaws, our quirks, and our struggles that make us relatable and human. We forget that it's in our messiness that we find our greatest potential for growth. Perfection can be isolating because it creates a barrier between us and the world around us. But when we embrace our imperfections, we invite others to do the same. We create spaces where authenticity, vulnerability, and true connection can flourish. We give ourselves permission to be imperfect. And in doing so, we give others permission to do the same. In our pursuit of perfection, we often overlook the fact that we are already worthy. We already have value, just as we are. Our worth is not something that is contingent on meeting certain standards or fitting a particular mold. It is inherent in our being. We don't need to change who we are in order to be deserving of love, respect, or success. We are enough right now, in this moment, as we are flaws, vulnerabilities, and all. The real work is not about becoming someone else. It's about embracing who we already are and recognizing the beauty and power in our authenticity. Perfection may seem like the ideal, but it is an illusion that only keeps us from experiencing the fullness of our lives. When we let go of perfection, we free ourselves from the pressure to constantly prove our worth. We can stop comparing ourselves to others and start celebrating the unique, beautiful individuals we are. We can begin to enjoy the process of growth without the constant fear of failure or judgment. True growth happens when we embrace our imperfections, not when we hide them behind a polished mask. The moments when we are most real, most raw, and most vulnerable are the moments when we experience the deepest connection with ourselves and with others. Letting go of perfection means stepping into the fullness of who we are, accepting all of our flaws, and recognizing that these imperfections are what make us unique. The beauty of life is found not in perfection, but in the courage to be imperfect, to be vulnerable, and to be fully ourselves. So instead of striving for an ideal that doesn't exist, let us embrace the truth that we are already enough. We don't need to change ourselves to be worthy of love or success. We are worthy simply because we exist. And when we can finally accept that, we can begin to experience the freedom, peace, and fulfillment that come from living as our authentic selves. In our fast-paced, achievement-driven world, we are constantly measuring ourselves against others, setting high expectations, and pushing ourselves to do more, be more, and achieve more. We become our own harshest critics, constantly scrutinizing our failures, comparing ourselves to those around us, and feeling as if we are never quite good enough. But what if we stopped for a moment and gave ourselves the grace to simply be human? What if, instead of viewing ourselves through the lens of perfectionism and judgment, we practice self-compassion? Self-compassion isn't about excusing our mistakes or ignoring our shortcomings. It's about treating ourselves with the same kindness, care, and understanding that we would extend to a friend or loved one. It's about recognizing that we are all imperfect, all in the process of growing and learning, and that we deserve the same empathy that we so freely give to others. The truth is, we are works in progress, and that's perfectly okay. When we fail, make a mistake, or don't meet our own expectations, our instinct is often to beat ourselves up. We tell ourselves we should have done better, we should have known better, or we should have tried harder. But this mindset only perpetuates feelings of inadequacy, guilt, and shame. It makes us feel like we are unworthy of love or success because we failed in some way. This is where self-compassion comes in. It's the practice of softening our inner dialogue, replacing criticism with kindness, and recognizing that our mistakes don't define us. The truth is, we will all fail at some point. We will all experience setbacks, disappointments, and moments of self-doubt. No one is exempt from struggle. What sets us apart, however, is how we choose to respond to those moments. We can choose to be our own worst enemy, to relentlessly criticize and punish ourselves for falling short, or we can choose to practice self-compassion, offering ourselves the space to grow and heal. Self-compassion isn't about denying our mistakes. It's about recognizing that we are more than the sum of our failures. We are human beings on a journey, doing our best and making progress in ways that are often invisible to us in the moment. When we practice self-compassion, we acknowledge that growth is a process. There is no finish line, no perfect version of ourselves that we need to reach in order to be worthy. Growth happens in stages, and those stages are often filled with mistakes, missteps, and moments of vulnerability. But that's the beauty of the journey. We are always evolving, always learning, and always moving toward becoming the best versions of ourselves. The key is not to expect perfection from ourselves, but to honor the progress we're making, even if it doesn't always look the way we imagined it would. Self-compassion also involves allowing ourselves to feel what we're feeling without judgment. We tend to suppress our emotions, especially the uncomfortable ones, in an attempt to stay strong or appear in control. But emotions are not something to be feared or avoided. They are messages from our hearts, pointing to areas that need attention, healing, or care. When we allow ourselves to feel our emotions without shame, we create space for self-compassion. We give ourselves permission to acknowledge the difficult emotions we're experiencing, to sit with them, and to allow them to pass in their own time. This is not weakness, this is strength. It takes incredible courage to honor our emotions and give ourselves the permission to feel them fully, without self-judgment or shame. In the same vein, practicing self-compassion means accepting that we are not always in control. Life doesn't always go according to plan. Things don't always turn out the way we envisioned, and there will be times when we feel out of our depth or unsure of our next steps. In these moments, it's easy to fall into the trap of self-blame or shame, thinking that we should have known better or done better. But instead of berating ourselves for not having all the answers, we can choose to approach ourselves with kindness and patience. We are not meant to have it all figured out. We are allowed to learn, to grow, to stumble, and to ask for help when we need it. Life is a series of lessons, and we are all doing the best we can with the knowledge and tools we have at any given moment. Another critical aspect of self-compassion is letting go of the need for external validation. We live in a world that often places more value on outward success than on inner peace and self-acceptance. We look to others for affirmation, approval, and recognition, believing that their validation will give us the sense of worthiness we seek. But this external validation is fleeting. It will never be enough to fill the void we feel inside. True self-worth comes from within, from recognizing that we are valuable not because of what we achieve or how we are perceived by others, but simply because we exist. When we practice self-compassion, we learn to validate ourselves. We learn to acknowledge our efforts, our growth, and our worth without needing anyone else to confirm it. When we are compassionate with ourselves, we can begin to let go of the shame that often accompanies imperfection. Shame tells us that we are not enough, that our mistakes are a reflection of our character, and that we are unworthy of love or acceptance. But self-compassion counters this by reminding us that mistakes are simply part of the human experience, not a reflection of who we are as people. We are worthy of love and belonging, not because we are perfect, but because we are whole, complete, and deserving of care, especially from ourselves. By practicing self-compassion, we start to see ourselves not as failures, but as works in progress. Each mistake, each setback, each moment of doubt is not a mark of our inadequacy, but a stepping stone on the path to growth. We are all in the process of becoming, and that process is messy, unpredictable, and often uncomfortable. But it's also beautiful. We are not meant to be perfect. We are meant to be real, to be human, and to allow ourselves the grace to make mistakes along the way. The work we do to practice self-compassion isn't about achieving perfection or reaching some ultimate goal. It's about learning to love ourselves through the highs and lows, through the victories and the failures. It's about recognizing that we are enough exactly as we are, and that we are worthy of kindness, both from others and, most importantly, from ourselves. When we embrace the journey of self-compassion, We give ourselves the freedom to grow at our own pace, to heal from our wounds, and to become the best version of ourselves without the weight of perfectionism holding us back. In our fast-paced, instant gratification world, it's difficult to embrace the idea that everything has its own time. We are conditioned to want results quickly, to expect things to happen on our schedule, and to push for outcomes before we're ready. But the reality is that there is a much bigger plan at work, one that unfolds at its own pace, often in ways we can't understand in the moment. The truth is, God's plan is bigger than you think, and the timing of everything in your life is part of that greater divine design. We all have dreams, goals, and aspirations. There are things we long for, things we pray for, and things we feel deep down in our hearts that we know we were meant to do or experience. We see glimpses of our future, and sometimes we can't wait for those dreams to come true. But as we go through life, we often encounter obstacles and delays that make it feel like things are moving too slowly, or even that they're not moving at all. This is where the challenge lies, learning to trust the timing of God's plan, especially when it feels like we're stuck or when our hopes seem far off. It's a lesson that takes patience, faith, and trust in a bigger picture that we can't yet see. When things don't unfold in the way or timing that we expect, it's easy to become frustrated. We might feel like we're falling behind, like others are advancing faster, or that we're not doing enough to make our dreams come true. It's easy to compare our journey to someone else's and feel like we're running out of time. But what we often forget is that God's timing is not like our own. It's not bound by the clocks on our walls or the schedules we set for ourselves. His timing is perfect, even when we don't understand it. The truth is, God sees the bigger picture, the parts of our lives that we don't have access to. We might see one chapter of our story, one moment in time, but He sees the entire book, the whole journey. And He knows exactly when the right doors need to open, when the right people need to come into our lives, and when we need to be shaped, tested, and strengthened before moving forward. While we might feel like things are taking too long, it's possible that God is preparing us for something greater than we can imagine. We may not be ready yet for the things we desire, and the delays may be a part of the process of equipping us for what's to come. Trusting the timing means believing that God's plan for your life is far more intricate, purposeful, and beautiful than you can even fathom. It requires us to have faith that the delays, setbacks, and challenges we face are not obstacles to our growth, but rather stepping stones to something much more profound. Sometimes God's plan for us looks nothing like we imagined, and it may take twists and turns that we never expected. But every step along the way is intentional, and everything is moving in alignment with the purpose He has for our lives. In those moments when we feel like we're being held back, it's important to remember that God is at work behind the scenes. There are times when He needs to prepare us for what's next, to refine us, to build our character, and to help us develop the resilience we'll need for the future. There are times when we need to grow in areas we may not even be aware of yet emotionally, mentally, or spiritually before we can step into the fullness of what He has planned for us. Trusting the timing means surrendering our own plans and agendas and trusting that God is orchestrating everything according to a much larger purpose. Another aspect of trusting God's timing is learning to wait. We live in a world that encourages us to move quickly, to achieve more, and to get things done now. Waiting can feel like a waste of time, especially when we're eager to see results. But waiting is not a passive activity, it's an active process of trusting, praying, and preparing. In the waiting, God is often working on our hearts, teaching us patience, perseverance, and humility. It's in the waiting that we can build our faith, deepen our trust in Him, and align ourselves more fully with His will for our lives. Waiting is not a sign of stagnation, it's a time of preparation and refinement. Think about the times in your life when things didn't go according to your plan, but in hindsight, you can see that it all worked out exactly as it was meant to. There were times when you thought something was meant for you, but it didn't happen the way you envisioned. And yet you eventually discovered that the delay the setback, or the unexpected change led you to something even better. Those moments are proof that God's plan is often much more intricate and purposeful than we can see in the moment. What seemed like a delay was actually a divine redirection leading you towards something that was better suited for you, or something that was in perfect timing for the person you had become. Our sense of timing is often limited to what we can see, what we can control, and what we think is best. We live in a world that tells us to seize opportunities, to act quickly, and to make things happen on our own terms. But God's timing doesn't operate on our terms. His plan is much broader, and His view of our lives is much clearer than our own. He knows the right time to bring things into fruition, and when we trust that His timing is always perfect, we allow ourselves to step into His flow rather than forcing our own. In the moments when things aren't unfolding the way we imagined, we need to remind ourselves that God is in control and He is always working on our behalf. We may not have the answers, and we may not understand why things are happening the way they are, but we can take comfort in knowing that His timing is purposeful. The things that are meant for us will come in His perfect time. And as we wait, we can trust that He is preparing us, molding us, and shaping us into the people we need to be to receive those blessings. There is also something beautiful about surrendering to God's timing. It frees us from the constant pressure to control everything. We stop trying to make things happen on our own and instead allow ourselves to be led by faith, knowing that we are on the right path. When we trust the timing of God's plan, we release our need to control outcomes, and instead we lean into the peace that comes from knowing that we are exactly where we need to be at this moment in time. Life is not a race, and there is no timeline that we need to meet in order to be successful or fulfilled. The beauty of God's plan is that it's perfectly tailored to us, and it unfolds exactly when we need it to. We don't need to force things to happen or rush through life. When we trust in His timing, we are able to step back and allow things to unfold naturally without the weight of impatience or anxiety. The path may not always be clear, and the wait may sometimes feel long, but trust that everything is happening just as it's meant to. God is working behind the scenes, orchestrating a plan that is bigger, more beautiful, and more fulfilling than anything we could have ever imagined. In conclusion, trusting God's timing requires patience, faith, and the courage to let go of our need for control. It's about recognizing that there is a purpose to every delay, every setback, and every moment that doesn't go as planned. We may not always understand the reasons for our waiting seasons or the unexpected turns in our lives, but by trusting in God's greater vision, we can find peace in knowing that everything is unfolding just as it should. God's plan for each of us is bigger, more beautiful, and more intricate than we could ever imagine. Embracing that truth allows us to walk with confidence, even when the path ahead seems uncertain. When we surrender our timelines and open ourselves to His, we allow blessings to flow into our lives at the right moment, in the right way, and for the right reasons. So let us trust that in His perfect timing, everything we are meant for will come to us. May we find strength in the waiting, purpose in the journey, and faith in the knowledge that God is always working, and His plan is indeed bigger than we could ever dream.